Every day, you're going to face people who test your limits. There will be critics, manipulators, and even people you love who don't always treat you with love. But here's the truth: your peace is your power. The moment you give others the keys to your emotions, you're no longer driving your own life. So, what if you could become emotionally bulletproof? Not cold, not numb, but strong, composed, and unshakable. This message is for anyone who's tired of being triggered, tired of overthinking, tired of feeling like they have no control over how people make them feel. It's time to stand up, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with clarity, self-respect, and calm authority. Because when you learn how to guard your emotional space, you're no longer just reacting, you're leading. When people talk about emotional control, most of them misunderstand it. They assume it means shoving things down, ignoring how you feel, pretending like nothing affects you. That's not strength. That's denial dressed up as discipline. Being emotionally bulletproof doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you feel fully, but you're not ruled by it. You can be mad, but not lose your mind. You can be hurt, but not lash out. You can be disappointed, but not spiral. Because the real power lies in recognizing your emotions, naming them, sitting with them, and still choosing your response with clarity. That's emotional intelligence in motion. It's not about removing emotion from the equation. It's about placing it where it belongs. Your emotions should inform you, not control you. The people around you, even the ones closest to you, will try to pull you into their chaos. They'll poke at your insecurities. They'll say things that are meant to trigger your worst reactions. They want to see if they can get a rise out of you because that gives them control. But when you master emotional precision, you no longer hand them that remote. You no longer flinch at every jab. You stay grounded. You breathe before you speak. You assess before you react. And in doing that, you break a cycle that's been draining you for years. Think about it. How many times have you exploded and later thought, I wish I had said that differently? How often have you replayed a conversation in your head, not because of what they said, but because of how you responded? Precision means you don't let other people write the script of your reactions. You choose the words, you choose the timing, you decide whether it's worth your breath or your silence. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you wise. Because when you operate from that place of calm command, people notice. They feel it. They can't manipulate you the same way. They can't knock you off center. And that presence, that calm, steady, unwavering presence, that's what makes you powerful. You begin to carry yourself differently. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You stop rushing to prove yourself. You stop needing to be right. Your confidence doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being grounded. And that kind of control doesn't make you robotic. It makes you intentional. You start to attract different conversations, different environments, different people, because your energy shifts. You're no longer walking around with your nerves exposed, waiting for someone to hurt you. You're walking with your spirit covered in armor. Not the kind that blocks love, but the kind that protects your peace. People around you begin to adjust, not because you're intimidating, but because you're centered. And that center becomes your anchor, even in the middle of storms that used to break you. You don't just survive emotional moments. You lead through them. You don't react. You regulate. You don't chase calm. You are the calm. There will always be people who show up in your life just to disturb your peace. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, a sarcastic comment, a condescending tone, a backhanded compliment that sounds sweet but hits like a slap. Other times, it's more aggressive, people raising their voice, slamming doors, intentionally ignoring you, trying to trigger a reaction just to feel powerful. They know what buttons to press because you've shown them before. And if you keep responding the same way, they'll keep pressing those buttons like it's a game. But here's the truth most people miss. Your peace is a currency. It's valuable. And the more you give it away to people who haven't earned it, the more broke you become inside. You feel drained, exhausted. You start overthinking every word you said, every facial expression they made, wondering what you could have done differently. But all of that thinking doesn't bring peace. It steals more of it. You can't win a battle by letting your emotions be the battlefield. People will test your boundaries not because they care, because they're trying to figure out where the line is. If you don't draw it, they'll keep pushing further. They'll keep borrowing your time, your energy, your attention without permission. That's why you have to stop handing out emotional access like it's free samples. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Not everyone needs to hear your explanation. Not every comment deserves a response. Sometimes silence is the boundary. Sometimes distance is the protection. And sometimes walking away is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because what you're doing is refusing to let someone else dictate how your day unfolds, how your spirit feels, how your confidence holds up. You're no longer outsourcing your emotions to the mood of the room. You're holding your ground. And holding your ground doesn't mean being aggressive or defensive. It means being rooted. It means knowing that you are not available for chaos today. You are not available for emotional tug of wars. You are not available for conversations that are just traps in disguise. When someone tries to guilt you, manipulate you, or bait you into an argument, your power is in staying still. Your power is in not giving them the reward of your reaction, because reactions are expensive. Every time you get pulled into drama, you lose time, focus, and peace that could have been invested in your growth. You've got goals. You've got healing to do. You've got better things to pour your energy into than proving your worth to someone who only sees your value when you're in pain. People test your peace because it's the fastest way to control you. If they can get you emotional, they can steer the conversation. If they can make you angry, they can paint you as unstable. If they can confuse you, they can make you doubt yourself. But when you stay calm, when you hold the same tone, the same posture, the same presence, they run out of power. They lose their grip, because nothing frustrates someone trying to control you more than your refusal to be moved. And that refusal, it's not about arrogance, it's about protection. You're not responsible for other people's inability to handle your boundaries. You're not cold for protecting your peace. You're wise for not wasting it. There's a moment in your growth when you finally realize that not every accusation, every misunderstanding, or every opinion thrown at you deserves a defense. It's the moment when you stop feeling the need to explain yourself just to be heard by people who never wanted to understand you in the first place. And that shift, it changes everything. Because for most of your life, you've probably been in defense mode. Explaining why you said what you said, clarifying what you meant. Trying to clean up after someone else's false narrative about you. And every time you do it, it takes something out of you. It drains your mental energy. It drags you into emotional conversations that lead nowhere. It keeps you stuck in cycles of proving and pleasing when all along your worth never needed their validation. The truth is, people who truly respect you will come to you with curiosity, not accusations. They'll ask instead of assume. They'll listen instead of label. But the ones who don't, they're not looking for clarity. They're looking for control. They want you to react, to panic, to chase their approval so they can feel bigger. And once you see that, once you recognize that defending yourself to the wrong people is a trap, you stop playing. You stop explaining to people who twist your words. You stop proving your character to people who've already made up their minds. Because nothing is more exhausting than trying to earn understanding from someone committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence starts to speak louder than your explanations ever could. You learn to say less and observe more. You realize that your peace matters more than being right in someone else's eyes. And it's not because you're weak. It's because you've matured past the need to wrestle with people who argue to win, not to understand. The truth is, when you stop defending yourself, You give yourself permission to protect your emotional space. You give yourself room to grow in private, to heal without an audience, to evolve without needing applause. People may not like your silence. They may label it as passive or distant. What they don't realize is that your silence is your power. It's your refusal to participate in conversations that only create confusion. It's your boundary that says, I don't owe you access to my peace just because you're uncomfortable with my growth. And as you walk through life, there will be moments where you'll feel tempted to clear your name, to explain your side, to shout the truth louder than the lies. But then you remember the people who really matter already know your heart. The people who matter don't need the whole story to stand beside you. And the people who don't, well, they were never really for you anyway. That realization sets you free in a way that no explanation ever could. You start living not to prove, but to protect. You stop performing and start preserving. Your energy, your clarity, your spirit, it all becomes something sacred, something you no longer hand out just because someone demands a response. And in that quiet, in that space of stillness where you no longer feel the urge to constantly justify your intentions, you find a peace that isn't loud but is unshakable. It becomes your new standard, your new rhythm, your new way of showing up in the world, calm, rooted, and unbothered by noise that no longer deserves your voice. Sometimes the biggest breakthrough comes when you realize you don't need to attend every emotional battle you're invited to. Just because someone throws a stone doesn't mean you have to catch it. Just because someone says your name with bitterness doesn't mean you need to respond. You grow the moment you understand that your energy is not public property. You are not obligated to give access to every voice, every opinion, or every person who wants to provoke a reaction from you. And there will always be those who try. They poke at your past. They bring up your mistakes. They remind you of where you came from like it's supposed to be a curse. But here's what you start to learn. Their noise is loud because their insecurity is louder. The louder the accusation, the emptier the source. And when you internalize that truth, you stop flinching every time someone takes a verbal shot at you. You don't personalize what was never meant for you to carry. See, people love to project their pain. Hurt people don't always heal. They deflect. They look for someone to take the blow. They never gave themselves permission to feel. And if you're not careful, you'll absorb emotions that were never yours. You'll walk around holding weight that was never meant for you to pick up in the first place. But when you become emotionally bulletproof, you develop the skill of separating projection from truth. You begin to ask better questions. Not, why did they say that about me? But what is unhealed in them that made them act this way? And that doesn't mean you excuse the behavior, but it means you no longer allow it to enter your core. You don't allow it to rent space in your mind. You stop letting random people live in your head like they pay rent, occupying the peace you worked so hard to build. You recognize that emotional freedom isn't about escaping negativity. It's about not carrying it home with you. Because the real power doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from walking away from them. That shift in mindset turns you from reactive to responsive, from defensive to discerning. You listen differently. You speak more carefully. You choose when to engage and when to disengage. Not from fear, but from wisdom. Because every time you respond to nonsense, you water it. The more energy you give it, the more it grows. But when you choose stillness over shouting, presence over panic, and boundaries over breakdowns, you begin to walk with authority. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that speaks even when you say nothing at all. You understand that you don't need to win every point to walk away with your peace. You don't need to prove your dignity in the face of disrespect. You don't need to raise your voice just because someone else can't lower theirs. And that kind of control, that kind of calm, is not weakness. It's a superpower. It turns every insult into noise, every criticism into background static, every judgment into dust that can't stick to someone who's rooted in truth. And it allows you to move forward with grace, not because you've been untouched, but because you've become untouchable where it counts, on the inside, where no one else gets to dictate your worth, your value, or your emotional climate for the day. One of the most powerful things you will ever do in your life is learn how to emotionally disengage without disconnecting from who you are. That's not easy, especially when you've been conditioned to believe that silence means weakness or that walking away is giving up. But the reality is, emotional strength is built in the moments where you choose peace over pride, where you decide that your self-control is more valuable than being the loudest person in the room. There comes a time when you realize that your triggers are not other people's responsibility. They're yours to regulate. You start recognizing the patterns. That same person who always calls just to argue, that same relative who knows exactly what to say to get under your skin, that same coworker who disguises disrespect as humor and expects you to laugh it off. And if you're not emotionally prepared, you'll fall into the trap every single time. You'll keep reacting, keep defending, keep giving away pieces of yourself to people who are not committed to seeing your heart. And every time you do, you chip away at your inner peace. You drain your own battery trying to light up places that never wanted your warmth to begin with. But when you start to become emotionally bulletproof, you stop showing up to lose. You stop needing to explain yourself in spaces where your truth was never going to be heard. You start realizing that not every conflict needs your presence. Not every argument is an invitation worth accepting. You stop attending every emotional fire just because someone tossed a spark your way. Instead, you assess, you pause, you regulate, you become intentional with your emotional availability. And that intentionality changes how you speak, how you listen, how you carry yourself. You become someone who observes more and absorbs less. You start noticing people's patterns without feeling responsible for fixing them. You start walking into conversations knowing exactly where your emotional boundaries are, and you don't allow anyone to drag you beyond them. You become less reactive, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that your peace is not worth trading for temporary satisfaction. You don't let every comment become a crisis. You don't let every glance become a trigger. You stop giving people the authority to decide how your day goes. And that kind of growth, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes work. It takes self-awareness. It takes practice, because you'll be tempted to go back, to argue, to explain, to try to prove that you were right. But every time you resist that urge, you're building your emotional muscle. You're reminding yourself that you don't need to participate in chaos to feel powerful. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to retaliate to feel strong. True strength is staying in control when everything around you is trying to knock you off balance. It's choosing peace when war seems easier. It's choosing maturity when ego wants to fight. You show up with calm in spaces that used to consume you. You show up with patience in places that used to provoke you. And you do it not because you're trying to impress anyone, because that version of you, the one who no longer needs external validation to feel internal peace, that version is your real power. Becoming emotionally bulletproof isn't about building walls. It's about building wisdom. It's not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It's choosing to stay grounded when everything around you is pulling for a reaction. It's understanding that your energy, your attention, your peace, they're not up for grabs anymore. They're earned. You don't owe your reactions to everyone who challenges you. You don't owe your explanations to everyone who misunderstands you. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself freedom from the cycles that drain you. The most powerful version of you isn't loud, defensive, or always ready to clap back. It's the version that knows when to speak and when to stay still, when to lean in and when to walk away. It's the version that doesn't shrink in chaos, but also doesn't engage in every storm that passes through. Because now, You know your worth. You know your triggers. You know the cost of giving yourself away just to feel seen. And you've made a choice, a quiet, consistent, unshakable choice to protect your peace, guard your energy, and live from a place of calm confidence. That's what it means to be emotionally bulletproof. Not untouchable, but unshaken. Not hardened, but healed. Not numb, but wise. And that's a version of you the world can't break.